What's up? It's your boy, D Change, coming at ya with another Daily Dave for Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. So I was listening to a podcast earlier today by James Altucher, and he invited Dr. Andrew Huberman to his podcast to talk about 6 things to reduce stress and anxiety. He's a Stanford neuroscientist. So I really like conversations like this because Dr. Huberman is actually able to explain the scientific terms and the processes behind what he's recommending and why it helps you out. It always really helps when there's a very competent science communicator. And what I mean by that is you can break down scientific concepts into layman's terms, because in a way that's what matters. You can talk science shop all you want, especially when you specialize in something and you talk only in those terms and people don't understand what you're saying. It's almost as if what you're trying to say is useless, right? And that's unfortunate, but it's the reality of not everyone having the same education, not everyone having the same train of thought. Not everyone thinks like you, so you can't expect them to behave and believe in the same things you do. And so that's why we have a need for kind of quote unquote dumbing things down or explaining things to people in a way that's understandable. So what I enjoyed about what I heard from this podcast, because I'm still only halfway through, and I wish I had finished the whole show before I recorded this, but a couple of things to note. One of them is because a lot of us are working from home. Dr. Huberman talked about kind of what you can do to make sure you don't go absolutely crazy, especially if you're suffering from this isolation a lot more. If you're a person who really likes kind of going out and socializing, you're more extroverted. I can definitely see this taking a toll on you. And so what he was saying is you definitely want to maintain kind of this regularity in your life where you still wake up around the same time, or you wake up at the same time and you go to bed at the same time as you used to, back when we still commuted, when we dressed up for work and all that. That's all fine and dandy too. You should put yourself in the environment to actually work. But what I found interesting was he was talking about sunlight exposure, kind of priming your mind for I guess for the start and the end of the day. So he was saying, if possible, when you wake up, you should go outside to actually absorb sunlight, rather than just look out the window. And if you could look out the window, that's great. He was saying in New York City, it might be very difficult because you might just have one window. You might not even have one, unfortunately. But he understands the difficulties that people do have, because everyone has a different living situation, right? So if you can expose yourself to early morning sunlight, a large amount of it, because that basically kind of activates your wake up protocol. Your body starts producing cortisol, which over time, throughout the day, the levels change, and that's what tells your body you need to go to sleep. So first of all, get the morning sunshine, right, to quote unquote just wake up for the day. And that helps to cement the wake up time in your circadian rhythm, because then later on in the day, you're supposed to get the sunset, and that's supposed to begin your decline into sleep. So then the second thing you do, or the part of the same concept, is that you get the morning sunshine, and then at sunset you get the sunset, because that's supposed to show you the progression of from bright sunny day to evening, right? This is why daylight saving time messes us up, because you shift that. But and also I guess this is why people don't feel as great in the winter, because a lot of times you go into work and then by the time you go home it's just completely dark, right? But if you could actually take some time to observe the sunset, I think that's supposed to help you mark that in the day, right? Because the thing about screens, and since a lot of us work on computers and stuff like that, screens and phones and all that, that's all artificial and is kind of like tricking our minds at times. So there's a lot of like, there's been a lot of studies about, you know, blue light and how it affects your circadian rhythm slash like wake and sleep cycles. So I mean, this might all seem like common knowledge, so to speak, but like really, again, it's I don't know, I guess it's just difficult to kind of hammer it home, right? And that's what I really like to find, is people who are able to communicate it in a way where it just makes so much sense that it compels you to change your behavior, right? So the second thing he was talking about was or one of the other things he was talking about was like kind of maintaining a panoramic view. And so what he was saying is this comes from kind of like I don't want to say primitive biological sense, but you know, basically, if you're to refer to humans thousands of years ago, before we had any sort of like electronic distractions and stuff like that, we had two primary modes of like how we observe the world. One of them is like panoramic, which is like very chill, very like, you know, you're walking in like the middle of nowhere and you're just observing the scenery around you, the landscape. You're taking all of that in. And this is very common and possible in various like nature filled areas. You go to like a huge park, you go to the actual wilderness, you go to the mountains. That's the type of view and mental state you can acquire really easily, because you're basically just looking out into the distance and like across the horizon, right? But then there's also like the hyper-focused mode, which is, you know, the kind of like the predatory slash stress inducing mode, which is extremely useful as an intelligent human, because before, you know, we had to use that to run away from lions or like communicate with each other on how to hunt down lions or whatever, right? That whole talk about how like we used to get huge stressors for the presence of predators and then like enemies and stuff like that. You know, like that doesn't exist as much in a lot of people's lives anymore. So that's like applied to like our everyday lives, where it's like something silly, like, you know, like your boss is not gonna come over and bite you in the neck and make you bleed out, but he's gonna come over and ask you for like a report that you haven't done yet, and you're like freaking out, you know, like it's that kind of interesting parallel that we've I don't know, moved so far away from where like we used to be, so to speak. So there's those two views, like panoramic, which is super chill, and kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say the off state, because technically they're not, you know, you're still definitely processing what's going on. So there's panoramic view and then like the focused view, right? They serve two very important functions, but the problem is, like, in this day and age, we are in that focused view so much, and especially if you're in an urban center. And I kind of noticed this too. So one big thing is smartphones. With smartphones, we're like directly looking at this small screen where there's like another world in it. Now, I love the internet. I truly think it's one of the greatest human innovations ever. But the internet has made it so that everything is at our fingertips. Like an entire new world is available to us. And what I find very unfortunate is that it's very easy for us to kind of get too wrapped up in that. I mean, I've noticed it with myself, my own, you know, I'm at my desktop computer. All I want to do is focus on that world rather than, you know, my real life world, right? Once we get Sword Art Online VR like level stuff, I'm gone, dude. I'm going to Fantasyland and I'm never coming back. And then when you die in the game, you die in real life. So no, but so, you know, that's kind of the complaint about smartphones these days, right? Like, all these kids, just all they're looking at is their phones. You know, people cross the street, they only look at their phones, they're gonna get hit by cars, you know, a lot of stuff like that. And you'll see it in real life too. Like, you bump into people, they're not watching, and it's just like, it sucks, right? This was exacerbated in my life in Tokyo, because everyone's just like staring at their phones, and it's a really dense urban center, one of the densest cities in the world, if not the densest. I think it maybe the crown was taken away recently, but the issue there was, you don't. I feel like people don't even see like a meter, more than a meter ahead of them, right? And they were talking about this. Dr. Huberman was talking about how, um, in an urban center, like you only think of you tend to think of distances as like a block away or like few meters away, never like never the distance that say us in most of the parts of California think of, where you have to get into a car and drive somewhere. And I noticed that kind of I guess that kind of dichotomy in Tokyo, because yes, there are a lot of times where, especially if I went into a more crowded center, like a super busy area of the city, all I would cared about was like, can I dodge all the people, and can I like get to the destination I want to get to, because I know where it is, right? It's and you're always looking out like at the 2 or 3 stores in front of you for like shop signs and like specific landmarks and stuff like that. Whereas there are other times though, especially when I wanted to relax, I would purposely put myself in, say, like a big park or like a bike path that was surrounded by trees, or places that mimicked nature enough. Like I went to I would go to the mountains or whatever very rarely, but I'm glad I did, because to experience like the natural side of Japan was also really nice. But I mean, yeah, they were like 2 hour plus train rides outside of the city. But one of my favorite things to do was if I could find a place where I could observe like a panoramic view of an area, even if it was the city. I really enjoyed those moments because I would walk almost aimlessly, and that was really cool. I remember like even in like Roppongi, like was it Midtown? There's like kind of this winding path, because Roppongi doesn't have that many like train stops in it. It's more of a like rich people car area in the middle of Tokyo, surprisingly. But like there's areas where I feel like you can kind of just walk and just look around, because it's less of a like heavily traversed area, right? And then similarly, if you were to go to Meiji Jingu, Meiji Shrine, it's a forest inside a city. It's a shrine inside a forest inside a city. And then if you go through like the back way, there's an actual like park there. And that was one of my favorite spots to hang out in Tokyo, purely because it moves you out of like the stress and the assault and the stimulation of like a dense city. Because once you like go back into the front entrance of Meiji Jingu, you're literally at like one of the most busy areas of Tokyo, at like Harajuku and Omotesando, and just that shopping area. And there's like tons of people going there for tourism, and just because they have to be there. So it's a very interesting contrast. Anyway, like stuff like that, fascinating to me. The whole like sunlight, sunset, sunrise, sunset, panoramic view, focused view. And there's more in there, and I'm definitely gonna jump into it to finish it. But I really like it when I hear stuff like that. And yeah, I'm just in general looking for more I guess practical advice on how to handle like the current situation. Oh, one last thing I guess is Dr. Huberman did say that like he had a long they had a long discussion about like dopamine and serotonin and kind of like the different purposes they serve, very briefly, because I think I'm gonna mess up this explanation. But from what I can understand, dopamine is like the primer, where it's like the anticipation of something good that's gonna happen. That's like the dopamine effect, right? Like if you're an addict of some sort of drug or whatever, or some substance, and you're like, I'm gonna get it in like 5 minutes, like that's dopamine. That excitement, that positive excitement about getting something but not actually getting it at that time, that's that feeling. And you fulfill it by acquiring the substance, but because you have so much anticipation for the substance, right? And then serotonin is more like the actual just, oh, chill out and like have good feelings type of chemical that you literally get from like an opioid or something like that. And so there's actually like a hard difference in the sense that like you can kind of take actions to manipulate your own dopamine, right? Um, and what they had explained was if you're able to kind of I guess celebrate and kind of frame your survival of this pandemic, of this isolation, like that's good, because basically you shouldn't feel bad about having to shelter in place for so long. If anything, you should celebrate that. Like you should be like, hey man, I've survived 3+ weeks of isolation. Good for me. Like this is legitimate progress, right? And so this is part of like a broader conversation about how you instill habits, how you kind of how you like operate in intense situations, um, and it's that kind of pushing yourself to like a positive end. This reminds me of like that what I was talking about that other time about like keeping your world small from that military standpoint, and this is very true of like I think anyone in essential work really. Like I think if you were to ask healthcare workers like how do they hold up during times like this? Like this is quote unquote war for them, right? And I think for them, my guess is going to be that like you just have to go at it one patient at a time, right? You can't think of it. You can't be in the middle of of treating someone and just think and all of a sudden think like, oh my gosh, how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are going to be in this situation or whatever, right? You can't start thinking about like, world hunger and then like poverty and then like politics and all that, all like all while you're just trying to do like one thing. Like at that moment, I think it's really just about the person in front of you, right? And I think I was listening to another podcast about like a doctor who went into war zones, and he said, you know what, it's our oath as a doctor to treat the person in front of us, right? And that's all they really care about. Like, yeah, there's like bombs being dropped around you, but you got a job to do, and that's what you're gonna do. And I'm like, dang, dude, that's mad respect for them. So anyway, I'll put a link in the description because I feel like I don't do it justice. I really enjoyed listening up to the point that I had to pause at, but I'm definitely gonna finish it, and I'm definitely super receptive to more techniques we can adopt to, yeah, just to improve ourselves and to get ourselves through this whole mess, right? And yeah, it's sometimes it's just funny because like my mom was like, oh, we're probably gonna be doing this for another month. Like I hope it's done after that. But like it sucks, man, because we know that like at least in California we're gonna peak in the next 2 weeks or 2 to 4 weeks. But what that means is like then we still gotta ride out the peak, and then we gotta let the numbers drop, and then I don't know where the limit is for what's the when is a good time to like open everything back up, right? And that's factoring in the healthcare capacity as well as like the damage to the economy and the damage to the people, really, because I don't know, I don't like it always sucks to kind of put everything in just dollar signs, but it's more than just that. It's the actual health of like the people around you and the nation and all that. So anyway, that's all I'm gonna say for today's Daily Dave. I think it's super interesting. I think it's really cool when I run into these types of discussions, because it really makes me think more about like, oh, like that's why we behave in certain ways, and I guess I've always been interested in stuff like that. So, and also I think harnessing or controlling our behaviors is very It's very valuable. So, alrighty. I hope you are all well and doing all right. I will talk to you in the next one. Peace out.